Hello everyone and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker. Storm is one of Magic the Gathering's most powerful card effects, letting players reap the rewards from casting a ton of small spells and then getting a giant spell in return. And if you enjoy Storm, then Storm Force of Nature is the commander for you. Let's see how Storm works. So Storm Force of Nature, 1 green, blue, and a red, legendary creature, mutant hero, with flying vigilance, ceaseless tempest. Whenever Storm deals combat damage to a player, the next instant or sorcery cast this turn has Storm. Storm here is in the perfect colors, making sure that you have evasion or making sure that you can get through to deal damage each turn. Let's start by looking at how this deck is going to be laid out, with the building up Storm count. These will be small spells or free spells to help us get going. Next, we're going to take advantage of casting those little spells with mana rituals, drawing us a ton of mana, and then drawing into more cards for casting some of their largest Storm targets. And then lastly, we have the good stuff to check out some new cards that are going to bring some really powerful effects to this archetype. But before we dive into those, I want to quickly mention some of the other Secret Lair cards you can add for flavor to this deck, coming out in the new Secret Lair drop.
So let's dive into those Secret Lair cards, starting with Earth's Mightiest Emblem, or Arcane Signet. Now this was a special card that if you bought $200 worth of product, you could get, so it's just a very expensive Arcane Signet, which, cool, if you're enjoying this and you want to spend, I think it's $65 right now, buying one of these, go ahead and do it. But if you don't need this theme in your deck, well, I just wanted to show it off here. But some of the other cards we had are Ice Storm, Storm's Will, or Jessica's Will, Lightning Bolt, and Aurora Borealis, or Manamorphosis, and then Soul Ring. The Soul Ring does come from the Tony Stark Secret Lair, but all the rest of these, other than the Arcane Signet, do come from Storm's Secret Lair, which I think is actually pretty great. Jessica's Will, very powerful reprint. Manamorphose is a great card to include in this deck. So is Lightning Bolt, and honestly, I think you could probably remove Ice Storm, but I just included it here because it was new. Now, let's start out by looking at some of these cards that are going to help us build up our Storm count. You know, that's exactly what we're trying to do in this deck, and I think some of the best cards you can add are cards you can play life for instead of mana. So we have Gitaxian Probe, Gutshot, and Noxious Revival. Gitaxian Probe is Phyrexian blue mana, meaning you can play either 2 life or a blue mana, look at target player's hand, and draw a card. Very nice and simple, helps us draw more cards, and we can play it for free. Gutshot, again, Phyrexian red mana, either a red or 2 life. This deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Now this one isn't as powerful, but I think really early game there might see some, pieces on the board, especially some small creatures that are really pesky. Gutshot here is a really good answer. And Noxious Revival, probably my favorite out of all of these. A single green mana or 2 life, put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Whether we just played one of our really good combo cards, attacked with Storm, and now have Storm on the next spell, we can get a ton of things back on top of our library, or put something on top that we want to cast with Storm. So I think this is a very, very cool set of cards to play. Next up, I want to talk about some free cards, which don't cost you anything, essentially, here. You'll see we have Lotus Petal, Mishra's Bauble, and Strike It Rich. Lotus Petal is a 0-cost artifact. You can sacrifice this to add 1 mana to your mana pool. So you're basically turning 0 into 1, which is a really powerful effect, and it's going to help us get ahead with that Storm count. Mishra's Bauble, again, 0. We can sack it to look at the top card of target player's library, and then draw a card at the beginning of the next end step. And then Strike It Rich is a single red mana that says create a treasure token. So we're basically paying 1 mana to make 1 mana. So all of these are going to be another way we can freely start getting that Storm count up. And then some cheap card advantage we're going to play in between. We got Brainstorm, Expressive Iteration, and Ponder. Pretty simple here. There wasn't too much thought different than what you would normally play in a Storm type deck, but Brainstorm lets you draw 3 cards, then put 2 on top in any order. Expressive Iteration lets us look at the top 3 cards, put 1 of them in your hand, 1 on the bottom of your library, and then exile 1 of them and you can cast it this turn. And then Ponder is a single blue sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order. You may shuffle, then draw a card. Some of those other cards I think are really powerful at building up Storm. We have Aqua's Form, Assault Strobe, Birds of Paradise, Chaos Warp, Mystic Tutor, Pognify, Preordain, Rampant Growth, Twinferno, and Windfall.
Now, before we see those Storm targets I want to talk about next, I would just say thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. And if you enjoy the videos I do, please check out my Patreon. It would be really nice of you. Now, let's look at those Storm targets to see what we're going to cast in this deck.
Now looking at the much more interesting part of this deck, where we're going to be talking about cards we're going to be wanting to cast to build up Storm and benefit from getting to Storm count, and then the payoffs that we can receive. We're going to start with Mana Ramp, because those other spells are going to cost us just a little bit of mana each, but we want to accelerate so we can continue to cast a ton of spells. We have Burgi, God of Storytelling, Desperate Ritual, and Seething Song. Burgi, God of Storytelling, 2 and a red, legendary creature god. Whenever you cast a spell, add a red mana. Until the end of your turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. So every time we cast a spell, we're going to generate a red mana. Like I mentioned earlier, all those spells that we cast for free, we basically net positive mana by generating mana whenever we cast them, even if they cost us 0. Desperate Ritual, 1 and a red, instant arcane that we can add red, so we're generating 1 mana, but we can also splice it onto an arcane, which I don't know how many of those we actually have in the deck, but it could come in handy. And then Seething Song, another great ritual type spell, 2 and a red, instant that adds 5 red mana pips. Next, I want to talk about cards that are going to give us some great value for casting as many spells as possible. We have Archmage Emeritus, Case of the Ransacked Lab in 3rd Path Iconoclast. So Archmage Emeritus, 2 blue creature human wizard with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Great way to continually fill our hand and definitely benefit from all of these storm triggers. Case of the Ransacked Lab is 2 and a blue, instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. To solve, you have to have cast 4 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn, and then when it's solved, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, draw a card. And then 3rd Path Iconoclast, blue and a red, creature human monk. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. A very nice way to build up a board just by casting a ton of spells. So I'm going to look at some large payoffs now and some ways that we can really get some big benefit, starting with Arcane Bombardment, Past in Flames, and Storm Splitter. So Arcane Bombardment, one of my favorite cards, 4 red enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, exile an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard. Then copy each card exiled with Arcane Bombardment. You may cast any number of copies without paying their mana cost. One of the really cool things here is you are casting all of those copies, meaning that anything that cares about you casting spells, you're getting triggers off of. In addition, if you have instants that you can cast on your opponent's turns, well, you get to do it all over again. So Arcane Bombardment is a sick card that can get out of hand very quickly. Past in Flames is a really nice sorcery that says each instant sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So basically, we can cast all of our stuff from our graveyard for 1 turn, so that's very nice. And then Storm Splitter, a new card from Bloomburrow. 3 and a red, creature, otter, wizard with haste. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token that's a copy of Storm Splitter. Exile the token at the beginning of the next end step. So we can create a ton of tokens in very quickly. We cast 1 spell, we have 2. We cast 2 spells, we have 4. We cast 3 spells, we have 8. And this will go on and on very quickly, that if we're just getting up to Storm and have Storm Splitter on the battlefield, we could probably take out an opponent if we can cast 8 or 9 spells for sure. Now, I want to talk about some huge Storm payoffs that I think would be very fun that are instant sorceries that we could create a ton of if we gave them Storm. We have Big Score, Frantic Search, in Irenicus's Vile Duplication. Big Score is 3 and a red instant. As an additional cost, cast a spell, discard a card, but we can draw 2 cards and then create 2 treasure tokens. So not only are we going to draw a ton of cards, we're also going to generate a ton of mana that we can then pop off the next turn, doing another huge Storm turn. Frantic Search is an instant that says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and then untap up to 3 lands. This will just get us perfectly what we need in hand, and we can generate a ton of mana in the process, because every time we untap those in response, we can tap them and add a ton of mana to our mana pool. And then Irenicus's Vile Duplication, 3 and a blue sorcery, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except the token has flying and isn't legendary if the creature is legendary. I want to make as many copies of Storm Force of Nature as possible, because Storm is an ability that stacks, meaning that if something has Storm on it twice, we're going to Storm twice that amount of times. So when we give something Storm with Storm hitting, if we can hit with multiple Storms, each one that deals combat damage and we get the Storm for, we're going to be able to Storm again, which is something we've never seen. It's super powerful and can be really, really crazy. So keep that in mind. Storm isn't redundant when you have 2 of them on the same spell. They all act independently. So that is a very, very powerful ability that's going to make this Storm deck very special. And then some great creatures we would love to storm out that are going to give us some huge value are Calamax, the Storm Sire, Stella Lee, Wildcard, and Talrand, Sky Summoner. Calamax, the Storm Sire, is 1 green, blue, and a red legendary creature elemental dinosaur that whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery each turn, if this is tap, copy that spell. You may choose a new target for the copy, and whenever you copy an instant or sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So not only is this going to come out, we can attack with it, tap it, we can copy it for all the copies we make casting it with Storm, but whenever we do, we're going to put a ton of counters because they're all going to see those copies that we do and put a ton of counters on this creature. So it's going to be very, very big and make a really big threat. Stella Lee Wildcard is another one that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play it. Meaning if we have multiple copies of this, we can just exile a ton of stuff off the top, and then we can tap and copy a ton of target instant sorcery spells after we've cast the third one for each turn, which is going to make Stella Wildcard just unbeatable. And then Talrand Sky Summoner, obviously having as many of these as possible, is just going to generate us a ton of blue drakes for every spell we cast. So this is going to be very, very cool. Some of these other really cool Storm payoff cards are Beast Within, Dig Through Time, Gutter Snipe, Mana Geyser, Seize the Spoils, Storm Kiln Artist, Treasure Cruise, Twinning Staff, and Young Pyromancer. So lastly here, we have some new powerful cards I want to talk about with Archmage of Runes, Niv Mizzet Visionary, and Ral Morson Mage. So Archmage Runes is 3 blue creature giant wizard with instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. This is a little bit more expensive, but I think it's probably pretty powerful and a great add. Niv Mizzet Visionary, 4 blue and a red, legendary creature dragon wizard with flying, you have no maximum hand size, and whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to opponent, you draw that many cards. We have a couple ways in this deck to deal damage like that, so this could turn out to be a very powerful effect, but honestly, generally say that you should build your deck around that if you're including Niv Mizzet in there. And then Ral Moonson Mage, 1 in a red, legendary creature human wizard with instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell during your turn, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Ral deals 1 damage to you. If you win the flip, you may exile it. When you do, return him to the battlefield transformed, and he transforms into Ral Leyline Prodigy. Ral Leyline Prodigy enters battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on him for each instant and sorcery spell you've cast this turn, +1 until your next turn. Instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, -2. This deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. Draw a card, and if you control a blue permanent other than Ral, and then -8. Exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell from among them this turn without paying their mana cost. Honestly, I think the first side of Ral is probably all you need to do, but he definitely gets some new cool abilities if you turn him over. The remaining good stuff cards in this deck are An Offer You Can't Refuse, Arcane Denial, Bloom Tender, Commander Sphere, Counterspell, Eternal Witness, Swiftfoot Boots, Thought Vessel, Thunderclap Drake, Underworld Breach, and Untimely Malfunction. And that is it. There is a pretty nice maybe board here with some other cards that I just decided to cut. In addition, the land base is also very nice, so if you'd like to check those out, please look in the description down below for the deck list.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Storm Commander deck. Comment below on what cards you think would be really fun to add or cut from what I, suggested. If you would please leave a like, share this video with friends, and subscribe. That would mean the world to me, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Now today's Scryfall card of the day is Angel's Feather. If taken, it cuts the hand that clutches it. If given, it heals the hand that holds it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.